So did you know that we have a 50% chance of developing a chronic illness by the time we're 65? 50%. I mean, that's too high in my book. I don't know about you, but I have no intention of getting a chronic illness by the time I'm 65. So what can we do to optimize our health before the health crisis? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Risa Morimoto, your host, and you're watching Modern Aging, where we chat about innovative and holistic ways to elevate our health and well-being as we age. If you're new to the channel, I'd love for you to subscribe. All you got to do is click on that little red button below with that little bell next to it to be sure to be notified whenever a new episode is uploaded. And if you're liking these videos, I'd love for you to give it a little thumbs up. That way it'll tell YouTube to show it to like-minded people. My guest today is life coach Dana Frost. Dana actually had a very serious health crisis about 11 years ago. She actually had a multitude of different health conditions that kind of led her on this path of discovering optimal health and then helping others get on that path as well. We talk about things like light therapy and Heartmath and morning and evening routines and the importance of napping, all different sorts of things, different tools that we can use in order to get onto that path for optimal health. So you got to check it out. Hi, Dana. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Risa. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So I'm excited to talk about this whole, how do we kind of create more vitality in our lives, especially as we are getting older. I think a lot of life stresses are pretty heavy these days, and how we can do this holistically, right? But before we kind of get into our discussion, I'd love to hear and have the audience hear more about you and how you kind of came across this path to functional nutrition.
Yeah, thank you, Risa. My path working with people started with my college degree. I'm a social worker, and I did social work, and then we moved abroad. We were in South America for 10 years. And while we were living in South America, we adopted 2 children. And that transition really led me to a life coach to help me with the transition. And the experience was so transformative and so positive, Risa, that I did my life coach training in 2007. And fast forward 10 years, I had a fairly serious health crisis. We were back in the US, and this health crisis really was it started my health journey of realizing that this 10 years of stress, where I actually had many warning signs. I had, a cough. I had different things that happened physiologically while under this stress. That ultimately, created this health crisis. The combination of all of these different physiological symptoms, and because of the stress, I had this health crisis. I have a pacemaker. That was in 2011, so it was over 10 years ago. And
wow. So you were quite young to get a pacemaker.
I was, yeah. I'll be 56. I was 45 at the time, and the electrophysiologist was really confounded. He ruled everything out, and he said, honestly, it is a worn out body part. The electrical conduction of your heart has worn out. And if we think about energy in the system, the electrical conduction of the heart, it is the energy, conductivity of the heart. And I knew when this all happened, I knew I could go back and think about stressful events where I felt like my heart was on fire.
Wow.
And, even though the electrophysiologist didn't really agree with me, I ended up eventually giving him a lot of research from the Institute of Heartmath. And I just had this very clear understanding and appreciation of what stress does to the body. And even though I was a life coach, like I had a lot of tools and I was using my tools, but underlying that thread of stress, even when we think we're dealing with it, there are always deeper layers. So going on this health journey, even after the pacemaker was implanted, I was still just as tired. And right. He said, you're going to have your life back. I didn't have my life back. I was still really tired. And so I began searching on my own for answers, and that, following that path of knowledge and gaining some tools. Really, it started with Heartmath.
So explain to me what Heartmath is.
So Heartmath, it is a research institute in California. They have been researching the heart rate variability, which is the ebb and flow of the central nervous system that moves between parasympathetic, which is slowing down of your system, slowing down of your breath, slowing down of the heart rate, and sympathetic, which is a speeding up. And, as humans, it is a part of the autonomic nervous system. It is intended to ebb and flow. We need both. But when we get stuck in one, we can begin to have challenges. So Heartmath, they have created technology that allows you to track your heart rate variability using their scientifically tested breathing techniques.
Wow.
And so that you can begin to bring yourself into coherence. When you improve your heart rate variability, your resilience improves. And they're very, very simple techniques. The technology that I recommend for most people today is called the Inner Balance, because it's Bluetooth activated through your smart device, and it's a little device that clips to your ear that tracks your heart rate variability, and then you have prompts in the app, so you begin to train and understand what's happening with your heart rate variability and how you can moderate it. So Heartmath really was that first tool that began to give me information, feedback, and tools to move forward.
That's great. So you basically, your heart rate variability, you want it to be kind of like this.
Yeah, you actually want your heart rate variability, the uptick and the downtick on electrocardiogram, you want them to be roughly the same. And you want there to be a nice pattern. So, for instance, when I had my heart crisis, my heart was barely beating. I mean, it was very, very slow. It was 38 beats per minute. I ended up in the emergency. Wow. Yeah, I know. I ended up and I didn't know it. I knew I was very tired. And that morning I had gone on a walk with a friend who was visiting, and it was a warm summer day, and I love heat and warmth, but I actually told her to go on ahead of me and I would meet her at home because I couldn't walk fast enough. That for women, we ignore those symptoms that in hindsight seem so self-evident. But it took me, I actually stabbed my finger with a knife pitting an avocado, and I had to go to the emergency room to, they ended up just taping it together. It ended up not really being the big deal, but it revealed this issue with my heart. And so, yes, you want the uptick and the downtick to be roughly the same. My heartbeat was beating at 38 beats per minute, and the heart rate variability was very irregular. Those are signs that the nervous system is incoherent, if you will. And, we know that babies have the greatest heart rate variability. And a healthy, vital adult has really good variability. That means there's a great distance between the down and the upper end of the heart rate variability. And if you think about flatlining when we die, it's flatlined, the variability. So typical aging, that variability decreases. And what we know from the research of Heartmath is that we can improve our heart rate variability through their tools. And there are, obviously there are so many different breathing techniques that we have today. We have so many tools at our fingertips to improve our coherence and our resilience. But Heartmath is my go-to.
That's great. Because you're talking about, it's not necessarily just the statistic of heart rate variability, right? Because it also it cascades to your stress levels and your organ function and all, right? So it's not just necessarily this number.
It's not heart rate variability. This is the body of work from Heartmath. It is not an isolated, so no parts of our body are isolated. And this is what happens in conventional medicine. We isolate. Even my electrophysiologist saw this heart rate variability in isolation. In reality, Risa, I discovered I was pre-diabetic. I had adrenal fatigue. There were so many other things going on. I had a messed up digestive system. And, when you start putting one thing in motion, then it positively impacts other things. So yeah, it's not in isolation, and it's connected through the vagus nerve that, travel. It's the largest nerve we have. It starts in the brain. It travels through the organ system. That's where it's connecting in with the heart, connecting the information on the heart rate variability, and then going all the way down to the gut and then sending those signals back to the brain.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the missing part, is that I don't know why conventional medicine tends to isolate everything when, of course, you have a headache oftentimes because you're dehydrated. You need to, you know what I mean? Like hydration is also a big issue. So tell me a little bit about what you did in order to get your health back.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Those are really serious illnesses that you had. That's not, having a cold or...
Yeah. Well, I have a pacemaker. So, the first thing was getting that pacemaker implanted so that my heart was beating regularly. So I went, I started reading books. The first thing was Heartmath, and I discovered it through a book called When the Heart Speaks by a female cardiologist, Mimi Guarneri. And then they sent me to another cardiologist. The muscle of the heart was fine. Eventually I found my way to different practitioners. So I did traditional Chinese medicine. I did acupuncture and herbs for a year. And I continued with her. I was also perimenopausal. So it was really a storm of complexities. And the pre-diabetes, that runs in my family. And so when I got that diagnosis, I knew what to do. And I quickly just was like, oh, I need to be careful. So that was probably the easiest thing to pick, to do, is we just eliminate sugar. And my glucose numbers, I've been tracking them since that time, they've been fine. And that was an easy thing to turn around. But really the healing internally, for the gut, I did end up doing a round of antibiotics for some gut healing because I had H. pylori. I did some supplementation. I did, some feeding of the microbiome, clearing out the dysbiosis in the gut. The acupuncture was amazing. I would go on to send many of my clients to acupuncture for hormonal issues. I had a couple of other things I never mentioned to my acupuncturist that just one day I realized, oh, they're cleared up. Because it's setting that acupuncture is really shifting everything by changing the way the energy is flowing in the system. So acupuncture, and then really had my wake up call when and this is a tough one for people, healing a chronic issue or a health storm of health challenges. I eventually did have to decide to nap every day. And I resisted it. I really resisted it. And I realized all these other things I'm doing for myself, the body has to rest to heal. It rests in parasympathetic mode. And that was
we underestimate the power of sleep for sure.
Yeah, and we underestimate. At the time of my health crisis, I was doing a boot camp at 5:30 in the morning. So many of the things that I was doing was that sympathetic mode, and the body doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know that you're exercising and it's good, versus, you're working really hard for a work project, or, the body just doesn't know the difference. And I really had to learn how to calm my nervous system down. And that included, really, I would say, at that point in time, for those 2 years, it really was the acupuncture and resting every day and Heartmath. Those were, I knew a lot about food already. I was already a home cook. I already, ate most of my meals at home, a whole foods diet. But I was able to tweak it. I wasn't getting enough protein so when we think about adrenal fatigue, when the system is really fatigued, we need clean sources of protein, and lots of vegetables, heavy on the protein and heavy on the vegetables.
That's great. And when you're talking vegetables, what kind of vegetables are you talking about? Are you talking like dark leafy greens or just basically anything?
I think it's a variety. I really hold to, if your digestive system can handle it. And again, I say because some people if you have small intestinal bowel overgrowth, there are going to be vegetables that aren't going to settle well. So given a healthy digestive system, I really think getting a variety of colors in your diet, because we get different vitamins and minerals from the different colors. So greens was a heavy part of it, but really variety.
So, I mean, the reality is that most of us react when we have a health crisis, right? Then we decide to do something about it. Um, now that you've been, now that you're on the other side of this, what advice can you give, or what can people do to prevent the health crisis to begin with? What can we do to really, put ourselves in a position? Because as we get older, of course, I feel like the recoveries are also a bit harder. Everything's harder, right?
That's true.
So I'm really an advocate for prevention, and how can we create a lifestyle that we enjoy that is not all painful, because I think people feel like, oh, I'm getting healthy, it sucks, right? But it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. I think that's such a great question, Risa. And I think we just really start with the basics. We cannot underestimate what stress does to the body. And so I think it's really important, evaluate what's my stress load, because your stress load is going to impact everything health-wise. So evaluate your health load or your stress load, and do what you can to learn how to moderate your nervous system. In our modern world, there is stress. We are exposed to toxic chemicals every day. Whether we know we are or not, we are. We are exposed to information that is troubling to our souls as a human. I mean, we have modern life is very complex. And so I think having a practice where you really are connected to your soul, it can be really this is very simple. We are with ourselves every day. And so it's really tuning in to yourself every day, understanding, where am I? What am I feeling? And gaining the tool.
Is that through meditation, or is that through just like taking a walk? How do you suggest people do that?
Yeah, I think we're all different, so it depends. Like for me, I do have a very clear morning practice, and I'm very to me it's like breathing. My morning practice, it's like breathing, and I had this practice way before I had my health crisis, but so it changes. It can be whatever you want it to be. I do believe we need the breath is important. How we inhale, how we exhale really determines how are we taking in life, how are we nourishing ourselves, and how are we letting go of what's happening in our life. So that's like where I start. And then the body needs to move. So as we age, the reason that we end up having limited range of motion, things get stuck in our tissues, if we haven't dealt with our trauma, and we all have trauma. So every single one of us have something that we need to clear from our past so that we get, the energy can move through. So we need movement. We need to move our bodies, we need to move the traumas. And for me, I'm not a huge fan of as we age, the over exercising that's really super demanding on the nervous system. But that's just me. I think that what we really want to preserve with aging is mobility in the joints. And the joints are designed to have a tremendous amount of pressure. And so for this, it's a practice called Kaiut Yoga. If you wanted to put that in the show notes for your community to just take a peek at that type of yoga practice. Because for me, it is. So Kaiut Yoga, Kaiut. The creator is Brazilian, but it's it's now, because of the pandemic, it's really widely available. He's got an online platform, and there are many different teachers, but he would say we're taking yoga back to the original intention of the beginning yogis. And I was never a yoga person, so I'm just going to, kind of describe it his way. But we use the body to expand our consciousness. And it's not the yoga that we see with the Western construct where we get into all these different poses. That's not the yoga that he would say is beneficial, because most of our bodies don't go into those crazy poses, but we get present with our body, and we have a series of poses in Kaiut Yoga. And it looks, you can be in a room of 10 people and the pose looks different on each person because each person's body is different. So we use different, pillows, really just pillows and bolsters to support each person where they are, where you might be, somebody in a chair with the yoga pose. When you access the joints, you're accessing the nervous system. So we're really trying to restore the original nature of the system, the musculoskeletal system that's connected with the nervous system. So it's a series of poses that you move through, there's no music. You're listening, you're moving through the poses, and you can feel constrictions in your body, and you begin to open up blood flow to your joints so that the immune system can get into the joints where there's restricted blood flow and begin to heal the joints. I will tell you, when I was introduced to Kaiut Yoga, I could not sit on the floor in cross-legged pose. It's called Sukhasana, but it's just one leg crossed in front of the other. I thought I was going to go out of my mind. It was my hips were so painful. I also had a very strong constriction in my left shoulder because when I had the pacemaker implanted, you can imagine the emotional attachment I had to that surgery. You have the pacemaker checks. At that point, it was once a month. I cried every time I went. It was just such an emotional trigger, the pacemaker. So I was for, years protecting the left side. What did that do to my shoulder? Pulled it forward. And before I knew it, I couldn't even lift my shoulder. And I had gone to physical therapy. I'd done so many things to set the shoulder free. And it really was Kaiut Yoga that set it free. And now I can lift above my head. I've got, really good range of motion. So we began setting, I want to say, do you see how that restricted range of motion in the shoulder joint was connected to this health crisis?
Right.
And
exactly.
What we find with people who have arthritis and these issues that really are in the joints, there's always an emotional connection. So, this idea of vitality, it's a full person adventure. And I love that you said, we tend to say, I'm getting healthy, it's such a drag. And instead, I just invite people to curiosity and no judgment. I always tell my clients, you're not allowed to have any judgment of yourself. Whatever is, and just accept it and be curious about it. So really create this atmosphere in your own life where you're curious and you're open and you accept yourself wherever you are, and you just really trust that the next best thing is going to come your way to help you on your healing journey. Because for me, I'm 11 years down the road, and it wasn't a straight trajectory forward. It never is, but along the way, I kept feeling a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really honest, and that's really true, right? I think people see people all of a sudden, they had cancer, they have something, they've recovered, and now they're running marathons, and they're like, oh, why? And they make it seem like it was so easy, but of course,
no.
And that's part of the beauty of it. And I, just kind of going back a little bit, I do love this idea of having set morning routines or evening routines. And I think that's really, really an easy, important way to ritualize something that is for yourself, for your health. And I think also something that you don't really think about, right? Because I have my morning routine also. And it's nice to just get up and do it and not have to think, oh, whatever. You know what I mean? So what are your thoughts on morning and evening routine?
I think this is a really important point, Risa, because if we if we want to take authority and dominion in our own life, then we have to be a leader, and we have to be the leader in our life. And that means we don't haphazardly walk into anything. We are purposed about what we're doing. And so I agree with you. Knowing what you're going to do, having a routine is important. And it doesn't, I don't, as long as when you're doing it, you can be present. I don't think it matters necessarily what you're doing. I think it's really being present in the moment and having something that is your go-to. You know, this is what I'm going to do. And I think the evening routine is so, well, let me just say about morning routine, it's very powerful to walk yourself through your day before you have your day and set your intention for your day. An evening routine is so important because sleep is how the body restores itself. And so how we move into the time that we go to sleep has a lot of impact on how well our sleep is, how deep our sleep is, how restorative the sleep is. And it's just so easy. Again, if we just go down the flow of our modern culture, we're just on our device, you know, watching whatever, tuning into whatever, and we're not protecting this container of who we are as a human. You know, we want to move into our sleep life with intention and in a state of protection.
I agree. Yeah. But I also want to say that when we talk about evening routine, we're not talking about watching TV and looking through Instagram for 5 hours. You know,
yeah, we're not. Actually, there's a lot of really good research on exposure to lights at night, because if we go back to, let's go back to original human design that is in sync with nature. And so we didn't have the modern conveniences way back when this human was created. And so ebbing and flowing with sunrise and sundown and that light, it's not as easy as wearing blue light glasses. You know, people say, oh, I'm switching, you know, the light on my laptop or my device, and I've got these blue light glasses. And I learned actually from an engineer who has a company called Viva Rays, I learned a lot more about that whole, you know, blue glass, you know, the different rays of light that come in from the founder of Viva Rays. It's just not that simple, because the human design is really in sync with nature. And so when we think about our evening routine, it's actually just not natural to human design to be watching TV and stimulated before we go to bed. We need, you know, we think about the sunset, there's a natural progression of darkening that happens. And so that's really my main point on evening routine, and making sure, like, I'm light in your room when you're sleeping can be, even though you may not consciously be aware of it, it's stimulating to your body. Your system is picking up on it.
Right, exactly. And I think that, you know, for people who may need to get a morning routine or an evening routine, it also, I mean, I know that some people, like my husband, likes to do things cold turkey. I am not one of those people. And doing things gradually also works, like picking one thing, right?
Totally. I agree. You know what? I will tell my clients, because this idea of being quiet is so foreign to the modern mindset. If, you know, it really is. So if it's 2 minutes, and, you know, this is another thing that came out of Heartmath, their research, you can slowly change what your default is. And that starts with these tiny practices. So this is why it's really hard for me to say it has to be this way, because we are all bio-individual. So what works for me may not work for you. We may have different religious preferences and different ideas, and, you know, about what's soothing to the soul. For my husband, his run every day, that is quiet time to him. For me, I don't like to be in motion. I actually need to be still and not move. we're all different, and you know, you've got to figure out what is that sweet spot for you.
Right, right. No, it's amazing. And when you kind of figure it out and you feel, it's funny, what may seem, you may be resistant to in the beginning, it becomes a necessity once it becomes part of your routine, right?
Yes, and I'm just smiling so big because I always go to a client who, I mean, she started coaching with me years ago, and she was very this idea of the quiet time. She could not wrap herself around it. And, the journey through the years, she always goes back to, oh my goodness, if I could have learned it earlier, if I would have embraced it, she says, it took me years to embrace it, and now I realize it's breathing to me. So we have to be where we are on our journey, and we just need to be patient with where we are. Yeah.
Exactly. So as we kind of wrap this up, are there kind of some final thoughts, some takeaways that you want folks to try? If they need the vitality, if they want more energy in their life, if they want them, to become more centered and really start this road to real health. What are some of the things that they can do?
Yeah. Well, you said hydration, and so I don't ever want to underestimate hydration. It really, if you want to shift your energy, go drink a big glass of water, and a healthy glass of water that's been purified. That's really, and we've talked about the breath, but I want to highlight that you mentioned that. I will tell you, there is a modality that I was introduced to, and there have been 2 different iterations of it, and for me, it really has been a game changer, and it's called light therapy. So I was first introduced to light therapy through Inlight Wellness, which is an at-home kind of medical device where you put pads of different lights on your LED lights on your body. And the body, because it recognizes light therapy is very powerful to make shifts, to increase blood flow, decrease inflammation. And then a year and a half ago,
different colored lights, right?
And different colored lights. A year and a half ago, I was introduced to the technology of LifeWave Corporation that uses the body's light system. So your body is the energy source, and they're round, they look like Band-Aids, they're adhesives, and when you put them on acupoints on your body, it's tapping into your energy system.
Wow.
And eliciting biological shifts. And for me, it is the easiest way to give yourself a cradle of support. It's cheaper than going to get, it's cheaper than like buying a light system device. It's cheaper. One of our patches stimulates your body's own stem cells, which is cheaper than getting stem cell injections. But the point about these patches, they're not transdermal. They are communicating with your body. That's a liquid organic nanocrystal in the patch. It's not transdermal, but it's communicating with the energy system to elicit biological shifts. So when you need a cradle of support, so what I have found, the changes when we're really having a health crisis, the changes are hard to make. And we need a cradle of support. And I have found the patches to be a real, very valid cradle of support. It gave my mom her mobility back from arthritis. It has really improved my energy. I mean, again, the health journey it unfolds, and I now have the energy. I thought my energy was better. I now really feel like I've got the energy I had way before my health crisis. So that I would, honestly, if I have to answer that is the other thing I would point listeners to is light therapy.